I'm talking with Jean Morrison. She's the president and CEO of St. Paul's Hospital in Saskatoon. You talked about a toolkit. What are some of the tools you think leaders need to have?
I think one of the first tools is an open mind. You have to listen really well and make sure you're understanding what's going on. And I had a nurse educator leader one time said to me, talked about someone she was working with, and you know, he really had a point. And I said, okay, how did you get to that? And she said, well, I just peeled back the onion, she said. And I said, you peeled back the onion? And she said, yeah. She said, I just kept asking him questions to try and understand where he was coming from until I got to the core. And from his core, he has a point. And we have to figure out how to work with that. And that listening and that peeling back is an important part. I think you have to very much be ready to know where you want to go or what the vision is. You have to have some vision that drives you, because you can't be passionate, you can't stay if there's not something that drives you to want to be there. Just to come to work each day because you don't want anybody else to be in charge, that's not a good enough reason, and it won't give you the passion to do the best job for the organization you can. And I think that's pretty critical piece, that vision and knowing what drives you. I think as well you need to really understand, so what do you do well and what don't you do well? Because we have to find a way to compensate for those things we don't do well, because none of us does everything well. We all have some deficits and some things we do way better at than others, and we need to know what those are. You have to know what your limits are, and you have to think about those, and that comes back to really understanding your own values and knowing how far you would go and how far you wouldn't go and how far people can push you. And because people will always push you, and so you need to be ready and understand what that is, I would say. Other tools, well, there's so many, and there's deadlines. You can't be in a leadership role. I think if you're in a leadership role and you're a continual procrastinator, and I would not say I can procrastinate with the best of them, but you have to, you know, there's a point where you have to produce and you have to figure out what that is and how to do that. And I think we're past the days, you know, it used to be that we had leaders who were there in title, and you hired all kinds of people to do a whole bunch of different jobs, and you didn't really necessarily do any of them. I think people have to come to the table a lot different now as we drive to truly look at value for dollar. I think you can't hire and get all the jobs done the way it used to be. Now maybe that's, you know, maybe that's only in healthcare, but it's been a real change in my career with people who, you know, went into leadership jobs and they were the public figure and did that circuit, but there were others really back home doing all the work. And now I think there's much more of a culture where the leader is critically engaged with the organization, and that you're truly out there and that you understand the work other people are doing, or you seek to understand the work other people are doing almost as well as they do. And so that's been a change for us, and I think that's an important thing in the toolbox.
So one of the things you mentioned before was having this humility to be able to look at yourself and say, okay, I'm short in these areas and I need to work on those. And it's also humility in terms of being able to accept feedback from your staff who tell you that you're short in those areas.
Yeah, big time. And the days, weeks, and months where you've had enough rest and you're doing okay, you can take that really easily. But the days when you're not getting enough sleep and, you know, and you've had so many of those come at you in a month that you don't know what to do, it's harder to hear it. But you have to be able to hear it, and you have to take that feedback and get better for it.
How would you describe your leadership style, Jean?
Yeah. I'm a pretty open leader. An open door. Like, I like people, if they have an issue with what's going on or with me, you know, come and let's sort through it. I like collaborating and working with other people. I want to know what other people think about where we need to go. I'm probably a very democratic leader. Yeah, fairness and equity is pretty important to me.
So sometimes coming to the president is not always the easiest thing to do, especially if there's something that you don't think is right or something that's not working well. So how do you establish that trust so people can come in and be open and candid with you?
Yeah. I think it's about relationship. If people don't know you, they have a lot harder time. And it doesn't matter if it's people that need the trust so they can come and talk to you. It's the same for those folks. You know, everybody has people in the workforce who have a lot to say and sometimes can be not very nice about the way they say it. But frankly, when you get to know people and you're out there and you've met them on their soil, it's easier for them to be open and trust you when they want to share with you and know that there won't be repercussions, or to have the discussion with them about some things that people tell you you do have to act on, and how you can have that discussion with them about that. And the same with those people that tend to be negative or who, you know, come at you in a less than positive way. If you know them, they're less likely to do that. They're more likely to engage with you as a person, and it can be a much more constructive conversation. So I'm very big on being out and getting to know the workers, the people that are working all over the organization, and the plant workers, the guys that look after the boilers in our building, which are manned all the time. They're always surprised when I find their corner of the building and I open the door and walk in, and you know, here's this woman in a skirt and lipstick, and she's coming down through the back corridors. But I think you need to know everybody that's doing the work.
I attended a presentation by Colin Powell, and he said that when he became Secretary of State, that one of the things he used to do is go down into the carpool, into the bowels of the building.
Yeah.
And they'd be looking for him. The Secret Service guys would be completely freaking out because they didn't know where he was.
Yeah.
And they'd find him down in the bowels of the carpool talking to the guys.
Yeah.
And he was out there getting to know them and what they do and how they do it.
Yeah.
Establishing relationships.
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I'm doing some training now, some lean leadership training, because provincially we've adopted lean management system as the way we're going to run the health system, and that's a huge learning curve. It's not something you know and understand in 2, 4, or 6 years. It's a lifetime of learning, I'm sure, and we're on the front end of it. But you know, talking to folks who are leading in working in leading lean organizations, you know, they're on the shop floor 50% of their time if they're in factories, and if they're in healthcare facilities, they as well are out there and responding on a daily basis, and that's not what we've necessarily seen in healthcare traditionally.
So what do you do to stay current as a leader?
There's many places I could try and stay current. I guess I was trying to think, okay, is that as a nurse, a clinician, or as a leader? But I think the continuing education is critical for leaders today, and I don't think it matters if you're working in a work unit and you're an informal leader or if you're a formal leader. The continuing education is critical nowadays. The proliferation of new knowledge and new information and things is just horrendous, and none of us will ever keep up. But we have to be reading, we have to be taking courses, we have to be going and learning from other people that are further ahead than us in some places, and we have to draw on the other folks who have had a chance to learn stuff we haven't had a chance to learn. So I think that learning piece is critical, and that's what I do. I talk to others that have been somewhere else, go somewhere else, or read lots.
If you were to look back at your past or even present, are there any particular leaders that you admire?
Yeah, there's many, and I really think of some of the first leaders I had. Diane Johnston and Paul Gully I worked for in public health in Melfort. Both worked in the province for different years, and Paul, I think, is still working for the federal government in community health. And they were just solid, down-to-earth folks who really listened well and really cared and wanted us to do things better all the time, and wanted us to make sure we're providing the right care to clients. And I really admired them. And I had many other Many other leaders I worked for. I worked at Sherbrooke Community Centre, Sherbrooke, a nursing home in Saskatoon, many years ago in the 70s, and worked for some nurse managers there who were just wonderful people, very compassionate people, and just led us with such strength and guided discipline that it was a real model for me.
One last question for you. If somebody came to you that was an aspiring leader and they wanted to be a leader, what advice would you give them in terms of how to become a leader or get them on the path to, or the journey to leadership?
Yeah, I think you really have to look at where they've come from, and you know, there's many people who have the natural attributes to be a leader, and if they aspire to be in a formal leadership position and into management positions, I think we're of a day and age now, you have to consider what's your educational background, and that wasn't always so. You could progress through organizations and become leaders in the past, and I think in healthcare, at the very least, more and more you need professional credentials, and that doesn't mean nursing or physician credentials, but it's management credentials. You know, it could be an economics degree depending on how big the organization is, but you have to come with some of that base credential. And so people have to look at, you know, how much are they prepared to invest in terms of their time and energy and desire to do that. And then I think they have to consider, really think about what's driving them to want to go into leadership, and what are they going to need to get there. Because some folks might have the credentials, but they haven't had an opportunity to have any practice at management, and maybe are having a hard time then getting into a management job. So can you help them seek out other ways of showing their leadership skill that will give them some of that background? And some of that is even volunteer work. You know, have they ever led a not-for-profit or been involved in a not-for-profit board or their kids' swim clubs? Frankly, some of those kinds of community organizations handle a ton of money, and it really takes a lot of skill to organize and keep those places on track and show those things. Show the continuing education. I mean, you want leaders who you can see are continually developing and trying to find those areas to grow and learn. And that's who we're going to look for.
Right. Jean, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I'm glad you were able to take time out of your busy schedule to come and meet with me today. Our guest was Jean Morrison. She's the president and CEO of St. Paul's Hospital here in Saskatoon. Thank you for joining us today on The Leading Edge, Conversations with Saskatoon's Leaders. I hope you found today's show thought-provoking, interesting, and motivating. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can contact me by email at dave@highperformancehr.ca. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to close with this quote on leadership. Until the next time, safe journeys.